An unprecedented humanitarian drama was unfolding at Burkina Faso's northern border. 8,000 families fleeing conflicts in Mali. Approximately 32,000 people had reached the Burkina Faso border. This number meant a mass equivalent to 1/16 of Ouagadougou's population in a single day. The urgent report on Captain Ibrahim Traoré's desk was shocking. The food supplies of people waiting at the border would last only 18 more hours. Water sources were depleted. Children were crying. Elderly people were fainting. And all of this was happening before the eyes of world media. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera correspondents had already reached the border. Pra had only 48 hours ahead of him. Either he would solve this crisis or be remembered in history as the leader who caused the death of 32,000 people. However, this operation was so complex that it exceeded even Burkina Faso's entire resources. The crisis had begun with armed conflicts that erupted in Mali's northeastern regions. Terrorist groups had captured 15 villages within 2 weeks. Families living in those villages had fled with only the clothes on their backs. Targeted attacks, civilian massacres, child kidnappings. When the Malian army failed to intervene, people headed toward the Burkina Faso border as their only option. However, this border crossing was illegal according to international law. This crowd, without regular transit permits, was technically in illegal immigrant status. Traoré understood the seriousness of the situation from the first report he received at 6:30. In the morning, Border Security Commander Colonel Sankara's voice was worried. "Mr. President, the situation is out of control. 8,000 families are waiting at the border. People are fainting from hunger. Babies have no milk. The elderly are sick. The media has also arrived. Everything is live on air." This statement made the crisis not only humanitarian, but also political. The first decision was whether to open the border or not. Burkina Faso had its own economic problems. The country with 22 million population was already struggling with poverty, feeding, housing, providing health care for an additional 32,000 people. This meant millions of dollars in additional burden on the country's budget. Moreover, there could be terrorist organization members among this crowd. The security risk was very high. However, Traoré was not just facing numbers, baby cries, mother screams, elderly people's last breaths. The humanitarian drama was growing with each passing hour. On the other side of the border wire fences, there were thousands of pairs of eyes looking hopefully at Burkina Faso's soil. Thus, people had pinned their last hopes on Traoré. The international dimension of the situation was also critical. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees was closely monitoring the situation. The European Union had announced its readiness for emergency aid. The United States had offered humanitarian assistance. However, all these aids would take days to arrive. People were counting hours. Traoré first convened the emergency cabinet. The meeting was attended by the Foreign Minister, Interior Minister, Defense Minister, Health Minister, and Human Rights Minister. The first 30 minutes of the meeting were devoted to evaluating available resources. The results were disappointing. Burkina Faso's emergency reserves could feed a maximum of 5,000 people for 1 week. For 32,000 people, this reserves would be sufficient for only 1 day. Health Minister Dr. Tabsa summarized the medical situation. "We have only 200 emergency beds in our hospitals. An epidemic breaks out, our capacity means nothing. Also, some children may be unvaccinated. Polio, measles risk is very high." This statement showed that the health crisis could be bigger than the economic crisis. The security dimension was equally complex. Interior Minister Ouagadougou's report was concerning. There may be people involved in conflicts in Mali among this crowd. Taking them into the country without identity verification is a major security risk. But identity verification also takes days. This dilemma put Traoré in a difficult position. The role of media could not be ignored either. International news channels were broadcasting the drama at the border leave. The hashtag number signed BurkinaFaso refugees had become trending topic on social media. World public opinion was waiting for Traoré's decision. A wrong move could seriously damage Burkina Faso's international image. At this point, Traoré made a radical decision. We're opening the border. We will take these people. But this will not be just humanitarian aid. It will be a comprehensive operation. Behind this decision were both humanitarian and strategic considerations. Traoré was planning to turn this crisis into an opportunity. The first step was naming the operation. This intervention, called Operation Humanity Bridge, consisted of 3 phases: emergency, admission, temporary settlement, and long-term integration. Each phase had its own unique challenges. The emergency admission phase was the most critical. It was necessary to take 32,000 people from the border within 48 hours and place them in safe areas. For this, a temporary camp would be established on empty land, 120 kilometers away from Ouagadougou. This camper had no infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage. Nothing existed. Traoré gave urgent orders to his army. We will set up 500 tents within 48 hours. Water tankers, generators, portable toilets. Everything will be ready. This task exceeded the capacity of BurkinaFaso's army. However, Traoré again found the solution in creativity. An urgent call was made to civil society organizations. Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF, all international aid organizations were mobilized. At the same time, help was requested from neighboring countries. Emergency support was requested from Ghana, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. The biggest logistical challenge was transportation. Hundreds of vehicles were needed to transport 32,000 people from the border to the camp area. Burkina Faso's truck fleet was insufficient. Traoré called on the private sector. We are in a difficult situation as a country. We expect your support as the business community. This call created unexpected solidarity. Ouagadougou's largest transportation companies allocated their vehicles free of charge. Bus companies gave their entire fleet to the operation. Even private citizens began helping with their own vehicles. This solidarity strengthened the moral dimension of the operation. The second major challenge was nutrition. Feeding 32,000 people 3 meals a day required a massive logistical operation, daily 96,000 meals. This exceeded even the capacity of all restaurants in Ouagadougou. The solution again came from creativity. Army kitchens were mobilized. School cafeterias increased their capacities. Civilian volunteers began cooking food at home and bringing it to the camp. During this process, the solidarity of the Burkina Faso people came to the forefront. The third critical issue was healthcare. A crowd of 32,000 people meant epidemic disease risk. Dr. Tupsoba developed an emergency health protocol. Every person entering the camp would first undergo health screening. FBIL patients would be isolated. Vaccinations would be completed. Chronic patients would be taken under treatment. Hundreds of health personnel were needed to implement this protocol. Burkina Faso's number of doctors was already insufficient. Traoré also mobilized medical school students. Final year students took emergency duty. Additionally, a volunteer call was made to retired doctors. Security was the most sensitive issue. The concern that there could be people connected to terrorist organizations among 32,000 people was real. The Ministry of Interior developed a 3-stage security protocol: border screening and security and intelligence tracking. In border screening, each person's identity information would be taken. Photographs would be taken. Fingerprints would be recorded. This information would be shared with the Malian government and international intelligence organizations. Suspicious individuals be separately evaluated in special centers 6 hours before the operation began. An unexpected development occurred. The Malian government sent an official thank you message to BurkinaFaso. "We are grateful on behalf of the Malian people for this humanitarian gesture," was announced. This support legitimized the operation. At the same time, the United Nations also announced its support for the operation. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees said Burkina Faso's humanitarian approach sets an example. This international support was critical for the operation's success. The first day of the operation started at 5 a.m. In the first phase, the most vulnerable groups were taken: pregnant women, mothers with babies, elderly people over 65, and sick children. This group was approximately 3,000 people. They were transported directly to hospitals and health centers with special vehicles. In the second phase, families began to be taken in groups. Each family was processed through registration procedures. Health screening was done, then sent to the camp. This process took longer than expected. On the first day, only 8,000 people could be taken. In the late hours of the night, a serious problem emerged. Water tanks in the camp area had emptied faster than expected. The consumption of 8,000 people was twice what was calculated. A water crisis emerged. Traoré called an emergency meeting at midnight. The solution was again found through quick thinking. All water tankers in Ouagadougou were directed to the camp. Additionally, emergency water aid was requested from neighboring countries. 50 tankers from Ghana and 30 tankers from Ivory Coast set off. The crisis was overcome after 18 hours. The second day went more organized. The registration system was accelerated. Health screening became more effective. On this day, 12,000 more people were taken. The total number reached 20,000. The remaining 12,000 people would be taken on the third day. However, on the third day, a new crisis emerged. The camp's sewage system became insufficient. A hygiene problem arose. Health experts warned about epidemic disease risk. Emergency intervention was needed. This time, the solution came from technology. Portable sewage systems were brought. Mobile shower cabins were installed. Wastewater treatment systems were activated. The problem was solved within 24 hours. On the fourth day, the last 12,000 people were also taken. Now 32,000 people were on BurkinaFaso's soil. But the real challenge was just beginning. How would they integrate these people in the long term? Traoré announced his long-term plan. Thus, people are not guests, they are brothers. We will integrate them into our society. This approach was radical and bold. Most countries plans to temporarily host refugees and try to send them back at the first opportunity. The integration plan included 3 main headings: employment, education, and social harmony. Each heading had its own unique strategies regarding employment. Traoré was pragmatic. Most of the people from Mali were farmers. Burkina Faso's agricultural sector was suffering from labor shortage. This situation was evaluated as an opportunity. The incoming families found work opportunities in empty agricultural lands. There were also refugees engaged in crafts: tailor, barber, carpenter. These professional groups were also in demand in Burkina Faso by providing small business loans. These people were supported to establish their own businesses. Education was the most sensitive issue. Refugee children needed to be integrated into Burkina Faso's educational system. There were also language differences. Among those coming from Mali, there were those who only knew French as well as those who spoke local languages. As a solution, a mixed education model was developed. Refugee children would first receive 6 months of adaptation education, then be integrated into regular classes. During this process, social interactions with Burkina children would also be ensured. Social harmony was the most complex issue. Cultural differences, religious sensitivities, traditional conflicts. All of these could complicate the integration process. Traoré got the support of community leaders on this matter. Traditional chiefs, religious leaders, civil society organizations all were included in the integration process. Intercultural dialogue programs were launched. Joint festivals were organized. Sports competitions were organized. 6 months later, the results of the operation were evaluated. The results exceeded expectations. 85% of the 32,000 refugees had successfully integrated into BurkinaFaso society. The unemployment rate was only 8%. 92% of children were attending school. More importantly, refugees had begun contributing to BurkinaFaso's economy. Agricultural production had increased by 12%. New businesses had been established. Tax revenues had increased. Refugees were creating value, not burden. The international community also appreciated the operation. The United Nations awarded Traoré the Humanitarian Leadership Award. The European Union announced an additional aid package for BurkinaFaso. The United States increased development support. A year later, it was possible to evaluate the long-term effects of the operation. Burkina Faso's international prestige had significantly increased. It had gained the image of a country defending humanitarian values. This situation had also increased economic investments. Bilateral relations with Mali had also strengthened. A security cooperation agreement was signed between the two countries. Joint operations in the fight against terrorism were launched. Trade volume increased by 40%. At the regional level, BurkinaFaso's influence had also increased. It was being shown as an example of humanitarian leadership in West Africa. Other countries began to seek Burkina Faso's consultancy in similar crises. The most important result of the operation was the increase in self-confidence of the Burkina Faso people. The understanding that we are a country that can make the right decisions in difficult situations settled. This situation strengthened national unity and solidarity. 2 years later, the vast majority of refugees had transitioned to BurkinaFaso. Citizenship. They were no longer refugees but Burkinabé. This process proved the correctness of Traoré's vision. One of the most striking results of the operation was the names given to newborn babies. Refugee families began naming their children Ibrahim. This situation showed Traoré's respect among the people. 3 years later, among former refugees, some had become doctors, teachers, businessmen. Some had become candidates for Burkina Faso's parliament. This integration success was being shown as an example. Worldwide, the technological dimension of the operation also led to important developments. An emergency management system was developed. Refugee tracking and integration software was created. Thus, technologies began to be exported to other countries. Economic effects became more pronounced in the long term. The workforce and entrepreneurial spirit brought by refugees revitalized Burkina Faso's economy. GDP growth rate increased by 2%. A significant part of this increase came from refugees' contribution. Important developments also occurred in the education sector. A multicultural education model was developed. Children from different cultures studying together strengthened the culture of tolerance and empathy. Improvements also occurred in the health system. Emergency capacity was increased. Field hospitals were established. An epidemic disease early warning system was activated. These developments were beneficial not only for refugees, but for all Burkina Faso people. 4 years later, Operation Humanity Bridge entered international literature. It began to be taught as a case study at Harvard and Oxford. It was referenced in refugee policies. The social impact of the operation was also permanent. In Burkina Faso society, the understanding of seeing differences as well settled. Multiculturalism became the country's strength. Traoré, in his speech on the 5th anniversary of the operation, said, 5 years ago, We had 32,000 brothers at our door. There were those who said we couldn't take them, but we decided with our humanity. Today, those brothers are Burkinafaso's most valuable assets. Today, the former refugee camp has become a modern settlement center called Brotherhood City. This city, with its schools, hospitals, and business centers, is one of Burkinafaso's development symbols. The most beautiful result of the operation was its intergenerational impact. Refugees who were children during the operation are today's youth, shaping Burkinafaso's future. They are a tolerant generation carrying the values of both cultures. As a result, Traoré's response to the border crisis was not just an emergency intervention. It was a historic decision reflecting Burkinafaso's values and shaping its future. The operation that began within 48 hours permanently changed the country's destiny. One of the most surprising developments that emerged after this operation was the success of refugee children in education. Most children who had experienced trauma began to become class valedictorians in Burkina Faso schools. Psychology experts explained this situation as survival motivation. Thus, children were making the best use of the second chance they received. Unexpected gains were also achieved in the economic dimension of the operation. Craftsmen from Mali brought new techniques to Burkina Faso, especially in textile and food processing areas. Production quality significantly increased. This development also positively affected export revenues. Burkina Faso's position in international relations strengthened. The European Parliament characterized the country as the pioneer of humanitarian diplomacy. This increase in prestige also improved the capacity to attract foreign investment. The most emotional moment was experienced on the third anniversary of the operation. One of the babies rescued that day, now 3 years old, was speaking perfect and defining himself as completely Burkin. AVT, his mother, in a letter she wrote to Traoré, said, "You saved not only our lives, but also our future." This letter summarized the true meaning of the operation.